Let's make sure it's actually streaming. Okay, it says we are now live for another Tech Talk. I am super excited about this one. I've been preparing for this one for a while. This has become like my new favorite topic. So we are doing one about how artificial intelligence is disrupting, well, it's disrupting a lot of things, but specifically, we're going to talk about how AI is disrupting writing in higher education. And when we wrote the headline for this topic, it was AI is already disrupting your writing assignments. And the reason I called it that is we know anecdotally, we already have some students that are using tools like what we're going to show you already. Ben, I think you were the one that was talking to an instructor who had students using an AI poetry generator to create poems for a poetry writing assignment, where you tell it the kind of poem it is, like the format, and then some keywords, and then it makes a poem for you that rhymes and is in the right meter and right format and everything, and then they just submit that, and they didn't have to do anything. And I think that's been going on for a while because it's not hard to make a okay poetry generator. But what we're going to show you now is something that's way more advanced, very sophisticated, and very hard to detect. So I think I'm just going to jump right into it here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is a website. We are not, sorry. Yes, I'm not naming the website because that's not really the purpose of this session. And I don't want it to feel like we are endorsing this particular tool or giving anyone direct links to something that we don't necessarily want them to have. But it also kind of doesn't matter what this particular service is, because it runs on an AI platform called GPT-3, which you might have heard of that if you read anything about AI. It's a very popular algorithm, and basically it's an AI algorithm that's been trained on billions of pieces of text on the internet. Basically, if it's a piece of text that's been published online, this algorithm, this program is trained on it, so it knows how sentences are put together. It knows if you see this word, statistically, what's the next word that's most likely to be connected to it, and then the next word, and then the next word, and then given this sentence, what is a good sentence that would follow that sentence, and it strings that together over and over again until it generates a paragraph of what appears to be human-generated text. It makes sense semantically, right? So it's easier to show it than to tell it. So I'm going to show you what this looks like on this particular service. If I go into student templates and I go to generate essay, basically what it asks us for is what they call seeds, text and keywords that we want it to generate something based off of. So we were chatting with Angela Rasmussen yesterday about this, and Angela, hopefully you'll let me use your example assignment prompt for this one as well. What was it? It was barriers and what was it?
Barriers to student success. Now I'm totally
barriers to student success in higher education.
So a pretty specific to the work we do kind of prompt, right?
So this asks for, first it wants a title, and then it wants to describe who you're writing to. So let's say first year community college success class.
Sure, yeah. See.
And then and then it says, are there any keywords or phrases that you want to use to generate this content? So let's say first generation might be a good keyword.
Mm-hmm. Maybe equity gaps, essentially. No, you don't like that one?
Yeah, let's do it. Equity gaps. Yeah. I was just, yeah, no, equity, it's good. That's probably enough. We can add more if we wanted to, but let's just start with that.
Sometimes less is better.
Sure.
Right?
So
let's the model go.
Okay, we've given it some keywords, and now it has a big green button that says generate essay outline. So I press this button. It'll take about 5 or 10 seconds, and it's doing all this work on the back end on their server side. And it generates an outline for a paper for us. So this is what it tells us. For a paper like this, maybe we would want to introduce the topic of barriers to student success in higher education with a focus on first-generation students and equity gaps. Discuss the challenges faced by first-generation students in adjusting college life and succeeding academically. Identify major equity gaps, offer strategies for overcoming these barriers. That's not a bad outline for a first quarter student paper, right?
Oh, that's great.
So as we're going through this process, I'm going to ask a question, and you don't have to answer it because I don't think there is an answer. Have we cheated yet? If I was a student and I use this tool to help generate this outline, and then I go off and write my paper, have I cheated, or have I just used a useful tool to help me get started? I don't know.
Got some chat messages we might want to.
Yeah, review. I'm going to do it over here.
Oh,
yeah, where was this tool when I was applying for grad school? Right? Like, this is kind of helpful. I could see the value of this if I know what I need to write about and I just need a little help to get started. This right here, pretty helpful. But let's keep going because there's another button here. Create points. So it's given us these topics for our paper, and now it's going to expand on those for us. Yeah, Craig says, would we say that this was cheating if it was generated by a group of students in discussion? Well, probably not.
yeah, that's great.
Okay, so now it's turned those topics into headers, and now it's expanded on each of those. So introduce the topic of barriers to student success. Barriers to student success in higher education are often systemic and structural rather than individualized. Yeah, that's true. First generation students and students from low income backgrounds face additional barriers. Also true. Equity gaps manifest in a number of ways, including financial barriers, educational disparities. So it's expanded this into a pretty decent outline again. Something else I should note about this tool is if I wanted to change one of these points, I could get in here and edit it. I could say, well, this is all great and everything, but maybe specifically I want to talk about, I don't know, rural challenges for rural students who don't have technology access. I could add that in here, and then it would continue generating based on that prompt as well. So again, the question is, now are we cheating? It's taken that basic outline and it's expanded it for us dramatically, but I would still have to go in here and turn this into a paper, right? This is just some really good talking points. So we could stop here, skip generation and edit from here. In other words, I'll take it from here. I'm a human being. I can write this paper now that I've had this help. But there's also this other button here that says put the finishing touches on this. And if I click that button, it writes a paper for me. And it's a pretty okay paper. I'm not going to sit here and read through the whole thing, but we could. And given the testing that we've done on this with prior assignment prompts and writing prompts, it's mostly pretty good. Sometimes we find little grammatical errors in here that pop up that you need to edit.
Yeah, like that unfamiliar as such first.
Yeah, so it's got some weird little things going on here. And again, you can just go in here and edit those and fix them if you need to. But like even structurally, it's not a bad essay. It has an introduction paragraph, and then usually it also generates a pretty good summary paragraph at the end, a closing statement. One thing I should note, it doesn't currently add citations to this for you. It's just generating text based on the topic and based on what it knows from the vast library of human writing that connect with these keywords. But if my paper didn't require citations, then that wouldn't be necessary. Or I could very easily read through this and then do some quick Google searching on Google Scholar and find citations that would retroactively support what this says. So we just generated probably at least a B+ first quarter student paper in 5 minutes or less. And I don't know, there it is. We just did that.
Well, I want to just bring up that in our testing too, I mean, we used like some random titles from maybe, I think it was like Angela's Book Club. We used Weapons of Math Destruction.
Mhm.
Compare that with, was another text, right?
Well, so we'll get to the compare part in a second, but we did like ask it to write a book report about a book. So
That was
we
it, thank you.
titled it Book Report, Weapons of Math Destruction by Katie O'Neill. And then we added a couple of keywords in there. And again, the audience would be a freshman college class. And it generated a pretty accurate book report summary of this, again, with a introduction paragraph and a summary paragraph, and it really accurately went through the points of the book. Something else to note about this is plagiarism free. If we run any of these sentences through Google, it doesn't come up as prior work anywhere. If we had access to a tool like Turnitin or one of those other plagiarism checkers, this will not be flagged by those, because the AI is still writing new work. It's just using kind of the language that already exists on this topic and generating something new from it that still semantically makes sense. It's still sound sentences and paragraphs and content and everything. So again, at what point does this cross the plagiarism line? I assume that we probably all agree that once you've gotten to the point of it just generating a paper for you, cheating has probably happened. But at what step along the process did the cheating happen? I don't know the answer to that. So how are we doing on time? All right, need to keep moving here. So then the question is, what could we possibly do about this, given that this tool is out there in the wild? And again, I should pause for a second. This particular website we're using is a paid service. Currently, I'm signed up for a 7-day free trial. Then it's like $18 a month. But here's the thing about this. The program behind it, the GPT-3, Microsoft a couple of years ago invested like literally $1 billion into this tool. And they're already starting to integrate parts of that AI into some of their systems and some of their apps and tools. I would be willing to bet that in the next 12 to 24 months, we will see a tool like this in Microsoft Word or in Microsoft Outlook, and they'll probably call it a writing tool or an outline tool or something like that, but it'll be essentially the same thing. You give it some prompts, some keywords, and it'll generate an outline for you, or it could generate an entire 5-page paper for you. And I would be willing to bet that that will just be a feature available in most word processors in the very near future. So the genie's out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag. We can't stop this from happening. That's why I say it doesn't even matter what website we're currently using. Yeah, so who specifically are they plagiarizing? C3PO? Well,
I love that.
what they're plagiarizing is the entire library of human knowledge, basically, because that's what the tool is trained off of. Is every piece of text it can get its hands on is what it's trained on using. Okay, so let's pause for a second, because we have questions that are getting very philosophical, which we don't have time for in 25 minutes, but I do want to get philosophical in the future. This will not be the last time we talk about this, for sure. But we don't want to just give you a moment of panic and then walk away. We want to say, what do we do about it? Yeah, what do we do about this? How can we, I guess the main question is, how do we write assignments that are not this easy to algorithmically generate content for? So I kind of have two answers. One is a short-term solution, and one is a long-term unanswered question that I don't think anybody has an answer for. So first, the short-term solution. There is an author and professor at UC San Diego, Juan Pablo Pardo Guerrera, and he writes specifically about AI in finance and in economics. But when this particular tool first started getting some chatter in Twitter, he made a Twitter thread about this and said, based on his understanding of the algorithm behind it, there's a few specific actionable things you can do right now that kind of short circuits this tool a little bit. So in general, he said more authentic assignment prompts are going to be harder for an AI like this to create content for. So what does that mean specifically? One thing that he notes is an idea called indexicality, which comes from like the philosophy of language and semiotics and that kind of thing, which I don't know hardly anything about. But the idea of indexicality is referencing another object is what it means. So what does that mean for an assignment? If you wrote an assignment prompt that says something like, based on the conversation we had in the week 2 discussion, write a paper about the trends or themes that you saw in that discussion. If I put a prompt like that into this tool, it would have no way of doing anything with that. It doesn't understand the context. It doesn't have the thing that you're indexing, the thing that you're referring to. So it can't write something in that way. So in a lot of different fields, that would mean having maybe 2 or 3 part activities where maybe you're electively generating content ideas or lists of content or data sets, and then you're using that to do something else. An AI writing generator like this can't do that, at least not yet. The next thing he mentioned is case studies and scenarios. Craig kind of mentioned this in the chat. There's not really a lot of independent thought built into a tool like this. It can generate sentences that are structurally correct and seem like they make sense, but they don't really have the ability to make inferences or make connections or apply knowledge to accomplish something or solve a problem. So if you can write an assignment based on a case study or a scenario, then it's much harder for a tool like this to generate content. And then just in general, more scaffolding, more incremental assessments is a good way of preventing this kind of tool from being used. Because if you're telling your students, today I want you to come up with some thesis statements or titles or themes or ideas that you would like to explore further. And maybe you do that in class, maybe you do that on Zoom, maybe you just do it in Canvas, but you put a short turnaround time on it and they have to do that. And then maybe the next day or the next week, then they write an introduction paragraph or something like that. And then the next time they write a first draft, and then they write a second draft, and then they submit their final work. When you scaffold it like that, a tool like this, again, doesn't know how to reference that prior work. So it's much harder for it to create anything meaningful. And then the last point that Juan Pablo Pardo Guerrera made was synthesis. A tool like this, like you said, is not good at comparing and contrasting 2 things. So we tested this out. Like we said before, we asked it to generate a book report, and it did that kind of really well, actually. But then we asked it, and this was, again, coming from Angela, she does an assignment like this in her class, compare these 2 different works and tell us about the themes that it has in common or the differences in how it approaches the same theme. And it wasn't able to do that. What it ended up doing was basically making 2 book reports, one after the other, but it did not know how to compare the 2, didn't know how to synthesize concepts, make inferences, make connections. It can't do that yet. So those are some specific actionable things we can think about right now that can make it harder to use a tool like this to write for you. But that brings us to our long-term question that I don't think we have an answer for is, what do writing skills and writing fundamentals even look like in a world that has tools like this? What do you think?
I think critical thinking becomes really important.
Well, and just to kind of add on that, I mean, when we think about this tool and the AI behind it being used, coming into Microsoft, that seems a little bit science fiction, but I mean, most of our students are already using Grammarly, for example,
Sure.
which is built on a very similar system.
Yeah.
They just haven't taken it that next step.
Yep.
So it's, I mean, we're already seeing spell check and grammar checks becoming extremely, I guess, potent tools when it comes to fixing basically the mistakes.
Yeah, and again, contextual grammar checks too. It's not just comparing two words next to each other. It's looking at the context of the sentence and saying, oh, in this sentence, this is the wrong word, there versus there, or something like that.
It's like, how did I get a red squiggly line? I don't even understand.
Yeah, but I can fix it, and it says the
And it
red
says it's
squiggly
better.
line goes away, so it's a better sentence now. So again, I don't know what the answer is to this. I don't think, frankly, I don't know if anyone knows what the answer to that question is yet. But I do think in the long term, we do have to rethink how we are teaching writing and what skills we're emphasizing when it comes to writing. That maybe the mechanics, yes, you need to understand the fundamentals of the writing mechanics, but that doesn't have to be the end goal or the learning objective, because tools like this will do the mechanics for you.
Mm-hmm.
What it can't do for you is the human creativity. It can't make inferences, it can't make connections, it can't understand themes, it can't understand the context and the indexicality of something. That's where the human brain comes in.
It can't create meaning.
It can't create meaning. That's a philosophical question, but somebody who understands language and semiotics and the philosophy of language better than me would say, there is no meaning behind this. It's really just like a very complicated spreadsheet that's just looking at percentages and saying, statistically, what word comes after this word and what sentence could come after this sentence. But it doesn't have any idea what the meaning of those words are. There's no mind behind it.
And as the concepts get more complex and less common, it struggles with that level of writing too. So we're also looking at writing at a more basic level of content. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Yeah. So again, there are no easy answers here. And again, I'm fairly confident this kind of tool is going to be completely mainstream in a year or two, and it'll just be part of any office productivity suite. And once that happens, we should be prepared to see that happen. And if all of your writing assignments are something that an AI tool could generate and create good work for, then now we're no longer actually assessing the student's abilities. We're just assessing their ability to generate paper. So we need to be thinking about that. Was there anything else that we wanted to make sure we hit on?
One thing I'll say is the chat is actually one of my favorites that I've seen in one of these tech talks. So with the permission of the individuals here, I kind of want to save it at least for our work later on. So as we continue to have these conversations about AI, I'm especially looking at what Catherine has been sending these last couple of minutes. So if that is all right with everybody, maybe not publishing it everywhere, but more so.
We might take
this
those notes. That's a good idea.
This is going to be a continued conversation.
So Ben makes a really good point here. This kind of content reads like half the internet pages out there these days. So like, and I think you mentioned it specifically, if you Google search for a recipe on butternut squash or something, the first thing you're going to find is something that looks like a travel story. I went to Maine in the fall and we looked at the leaves, and I went to a farmer's market and I got this butternut squash and I met this guy and we fell in love. And then I went home and made butternut squash soup, and this is the recipe. Right now, humans have to generate all that content, but tools like this can generate that stuff for you. And in fact, that's kind of the business model behind this particular tool we looked at. Yes, it can write student essays, but its main purpose is to write social media content. You tell it, I need to post a butternut squash soup recipe and I need to write a story ahead of it. Keywords, story about the fall, butternut squash recipe. And then it'll just write that for you and you put it on your blog. And this is actually kind of a growing trend in internet search technology. Is Google searching is becoming less and less helpful because the highest results for most things are becoming just kind of this nonsense content farmed stuff that is just there to take up space and to get clicks so that they can get ad revenue. Ben, you've mentioned this before. There's a growing trend of, if you're going to search for a question on Google, you type Reddit at the end, because the search results will then be community discussion board posts by actual humans who are asking the questions and finding answers. If you don't do that, then you're just going to get some search engine optimized BS website that just pumps out nonsense content just to get clicked.
AI bomb.
Yeah, and that's going to get worse because of tools like this. It's going to reach the point where normal Google searching will be essentially useless, I think.
So really positive note that we wanted to leave you all with. I know we were all looking for positivity in this session.
Yeah, well, so I think there is positivity here though, because like somebody said earlier, you know, where was this tool when I was in grad school? This is an incredibly powerful tool for helping you generate outlines or brainstorming or organizing your existing thoughts or just improving your writing. It does have a lot of value there and a lot of potential there. The question is, how can we do that without just turning off our brains and not actually having any creative input in those writing assignments? Yeah, so again, this is not the end of this conversation at all. I think we're going to keep talking about some of these things specifically, what you can do to deal with it, how you can move beyond it, potentially even how you could use this to your advantage in your classes rather than just acting like it doesn't exist, because potentially it does open up a lot of opportunities if we're engaging with it proactively and thinking about it ahead of time.
Yeah, that's right. We've got to learn how to work with it instead of against it.
Because, you know, I think, Ben, I think you made this comment yesterday or something in a different conversation. It's kind of like the invention of pocket calculators in mathematics, where at a certain point, we don't have to focus as much on the mechanics because the machine will do that for us. What you have to focus on is the application, the critical thinking, the pattern recognition, the knowing which formula to apply to which situation and what it does, and the why. And I think that's kind of how we need to start thinking about writing as a skill. Anyway, bye all. That's it. We're out of time. No, I don't have to be anywhere right away. Although Nick, I
got to run to a session, but it's been good seeing you all.
Yeah, if anybody wants to chat or ask questions or share any ideas, I'm happy to hang out for a while longer.
Yeah, my mind is blown. So
yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. It's fascinating. It's really interesting. Yeah, it brings up so many questions. And honestly, I need to think through it. I wouldn't even know where to begin as far as teaching writing, which is what I do. But yeah, I think it's can be a great tool, but I can also see it just people no longer need to think for themselves, just like we no longer need to do a lot of things for ourselves. So thinking will be outsourced to the machines.
Well,
probably. Maybe.
I mean, I think so. One thing that I have seen, I think Inside Higher Ed had an article about this concept very recently. And in that article, one of the instructors they interviewed had assigned their students to have an AI algorithm generate a paper. And then the student's task was to analyze it and say, what did this get right? What did it get wrong? What's missing? And the thing that the students largely concluded was it is missing that sense of meaning, that sense of actual connection to the content. Yeah, it all kind of makes sense. And it is summarizing information pretty well, but it's not making any kind of intuitive leaps. And that's what the human can still do. Oh, thanks, Ben. He put the link to the higher ed article in the chat, and I can put that on the YouTube description later on.
You know, I think what this does is sort of challenge the ubiquity of the essay as a way of showing knowledge or engaging in learning.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that's a good thing, because I kind of happen to be a fan of essays. Really well-written essays, at least I can say I'm a fan of that. Yeah. In my world, in public speaking, of course, a student, I suppose, could read from a manuscript that's generated using this kind of tool, but it would still be kind of a crappy speech. you know, looking at what was generated, there's really not much there to engage an audience. So, you know, formalistically, it might look like a B paper in terms of grammar, punctuation, usage, coverage of the topic, those kinds of things. But it would be a C or even worse as a speech, just because of what's missing from it.
Sure.
You know, that element of audience engagement and interaction and those kinds of things. So
Which
I put in
maybe-
the chat one of the things I saw missing from this, and I don't know, maybe this tool will evolve to be able to do this, but there were no concrete examples drawn from the students' research, no quoted materials. It was just, you know, abstract concept followed by abstract concept with no concrete examples to support it. So yeah, it might seem initially a little bit difficult to detect, but my guess is an experienced instructor could probably tag this pretty easily. Couldn't prove it to be plagiarized,
Right.
but you know, based on the discussion, if you're drawing from the whole basis of human knowledge, you're not plagiarizing.
Yeah. So I mean, Craig,
Yeah.
I think a really good point there is maybe we just need to rethink what we are assessing on and what we are asking our students to focus their efforts on. If we are telling them you're being graded on mechanics and grammar and word count, well, that's no longer accessible with a tool like this.
Mhm.
That is 100% being handled by the machine.
Right.
But if you are grading on concrete examples and personal research and connections to the content or connections to your life or community or something like that, then that becomes much harder for the AI to do for you, and that does still fall on the student. And again, this is just one tool. This is just a writing tool. There are also tools that generate art and graphic design and imagery. There are tools that generate music. There are tools that can listen to the sample of somebody's voice and then create new audio using that person's voice. And these things are becoming more and more ubiquitous, and some of them are still easy to detect, but they're getting better all the time. And they will not be so easy to detect even just in the very, very near future.
I did see one tool, Craig, that you might find interesting. You can take maybe 5 or 6 pictures of your face at different, I don't know, angles, and then upload a script, and it will read it for you, and you can choose the voice and the accent. And you know, if you pair it with your, it'll make a video of it. And so if you pair it with your AI writing bot, you know, the robot's completely taken over.
That's it. Then I am going to retire.
Yeah.
Jennifer and I are out the door.
Yeah, so it's fascinating. It's scary. It's not going away, but I think that if we are proactive about it and thoughtful about it, we can find ways to work with it and not just ignore it. But it's going to be a long-term conversation. And again, this will not be the last we talk about this.
Yeah, I look forward to continued conversations for sure.
Yeah, we need some of our philosophy instructors to help us out here, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be a great series at the Falls.
Yeah, with their philosophy series.
Philosophy, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like it. All right,
Okay,
I'm going to go ahead
thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. Oh, what did you say?
Oh, I was just going to get off.
Oh, great.
So
All right. I'm going to end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for a really interesting topic. I'm going to end the live stream, and we'll see you all actually in a couple of weeks, because we won't have one next week because e-learning is helping with a training for the accelerated fast track program. But we will be back with another Tech Talk in 2 weeks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.